Patrick, thank you again for joining us. Again, you are an aquatic biologist and executive director with Save the Manatees. Thank you for joining today. I want to ask you one question about these manatee deaths so far this year. We're only into the month of April. Although it's less than the numbers we saw this time last year, how do you think seeing over 500 deaths so far has impacted the population for 2022?
Well, it's a very severe blow on top of a catastrophic losses last year. If you look at the east coast of Florida, that's still where most of the mortality is happening. It's far above what's happening on the west coast. And so the Indian River Lagoon problems, where we've had the harmful algal blooms that caused the seagrass loss, that's continuing.
And with that, what are some of the main reasons for those manatee deaths? I know you just mentioned with the Indian River Lagoon, with the loss of seagrass due to algae. What are some of the other reasons? Big one, obviously.
So the big one is starvation. And last year was the first time we've ever experienced that level of starvation in any form. And it's being repeated over this year. But in addition to that, the watercraft injuries and mortalities are still quite significant for manatees. That's a very serious problem for them. It has been, it's still a growing problem. As we get more development, more growth, and so forth, those will continue to be problems on top of what we're having with the starvation.
So let's kind of break that down. Go into the starvation. Why are we seeing the lack of seagrass growth, and what is aiding in the algae blooming?
Right. So it really comes down to, we've had decades of too much nutrient pollution coming from human waste, whether that's leaching through the groundwater from our septic tanks that are failing and put in places they shouldn't have been, improperly treated sewage not being treated to the capacity it needs to be, and then breakages and even overflows from the sewage. And then the third major factor for the nutrient is from fertilizers, and that can come from the agriculture or even from all those hundreds of thousands of backyards where too much fertilizer is being put on just for the green lawns.
And kind of break down what we as a community can do. I know you mentioned fertilizer. So those people that live right along that riverfront or close to the lagoon, what can we do to help bring back some of that pollution and do our part?
Well, one step anyone can do that lives anywhere near the lagoon or the waterways, any of the intercoastal waterways, St. Johns River, that as well, because we're having problems there too and loss of the submerged aquatic vegetation. They can either not fertilize or be very careful about the type of fertilizer they use and when they use it. And if it's used anywhere around the time there's going to be rain and so forth, that can just run off right either directly into the waterways or through the stormwater systems. And that brings much of that into the lagoon as well.
So going on to next, we touched on the seagrass. You said the next one was boaters. We're heading into the spring and summer season. A lot of people are going to be out in boats in Florida. What do we need to look out for specifically to help kind of bring down those boat strikes?
Right. First and foremost, if there's a speed zone where your regulated speed is at a slower speed, you should follow that as a boater. In addition to that, be looking for operating in deeper water wherever you can. Gives the manatee a chance to get away from you and also your boat to clear over the top. Wear polarized sunglasses. Be looking for manatees directly, but also that they create little footprints on flat spots on top of the water. You can see those, and you can tell a manatee is essentially ahead of where those are, and pay attention. We, of course, at Save the Manatee Club have a lot of free resources for homeowners to put up signs to let people know there are manatees in their area, but also banners that if you, as a boater, see a manatee in an area, see a boat approaching it, you can hold the banner up, just alert that boater, because they're not going to hurt the manatees on purpose. This is something that's about vigilance.
Yeah. And I guess going forward here with the summer season and stuff, we've already seen about 500 deaths compared to last year where the total was over 1,000 deaths. At the rate we're going so far, do you think we'll get close to that, above it, or below it?
Well, we're about at least twice of what we should be without this mortality event in terms of the starvation. We hope we won't reach that record that we did last year. In essence, there's even less manatees though to die. So there's a combination of things going on. But the other thing in terms of the boaters as well, and those that live along the water, report any sick or injured manatees, because that's really critical. They can be rescued, brought into one of the rehabilitation facilities and help nurse them back to health. So that's been a big part of what needs to be done and needs to be done.
And one other thing the FWC kind of helped with this year is they had the feeding program over the winter. And I know they're into how that worked, what the results were from that, and then they're going to look into what they can possibly do next winter. What are your thoughts on that feeding program?
Yeah, since the prospects of recovery of the seagrasses significantly over a short period of time are not good, it's likely going to be necessary again in the Brevard County area at that particular power plant to look at that and their surrounding waters. But right now, most of the manatees are spread out. They're looking for food wherever they can in the freshwater systems, as well as what's remaining in the estuarine systems. But come next winter, they're going to have to both stay warm and try to find food too. We do believe the supplemental feeding program helped, but it didn't near take up for what all the seagrass that's been lost, and it really can't do that. But it's a benefit that we need to look at again.
If there's one last thing you could say to the community, what would it be heading into the summer season here?
Get a hold of your local government leaders, your regional government, the state of Florida, the governor, and your senators, and really let them know that it's the water quality problems that's led to the harmful algal blooms that's killed the seagrass, that's causing the manatees to be starved. We, along with other organizations, are actually in discussions with the Environmental Protection Agency, the Fish and Wildlife Service. We want them to step up the standard so that we're not in this situation for decades going forward. And so it's been quite important that we recover the ecosystem, protect the manatees in the meantime, but our laws need to be strengthened.
All right. Thank you again, Patrick, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.